Good morning. My name's Ed Armentrout, and I'm the pastor here at Avondale United Methodist Church. Our scripture I picked out this morning is from Mark chapter 10, verse 46 through 52. And they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him on the way. So I called this message, Your Faith. So a little background here. So they're coming to the time of Passover. Jericho is about 15 miles from Jerusalem. And so it was thought that if you were within that area, 15 miles or so, and you were a male over 12, that you should attend the Passover in person into Jerusalem. But some people weren't physically able to go that distance. Some couldn't for whatever reason. And so they this Ball State's homecoming parade, this is kind of my best example, people would stand alongside the road and watch the people go by. And so you had a lot of people doing that. Now in Jericho, it was particularly a religious settlement because there were about 20,000 priests assigned to the temple, and you couldn't all be working at the same time. And so many of them lived in that Jericho area. And they would have a tendency to come out maybe a little more than everybody else to see the people going by. And one of the reasons they would do that, as people would walk with a group, with their group, whatever the group was, they would teach along the way. And so as they were walking, they would be talking and explaining what they thought the scriptures meant to the group around them. And so a lot of the religious leaders knew that Jesus was probably going to be going into Jerusalem, and they were standing there waiting for him to come along. Now, you may not understand why they're telling Bartimaeus to be quiet, but the problem is you're walking and talking and teaching. If somebody's yelling in the background, "Son of David, Son of David," then he would be disturbing the crowd. And so some of those that were trying to listen to Jesus would have said, "Hey, we need you to be quiet. We can't hear over you because you're yelling so much." And so sometimes I think when we read those things, we go, well, why wouldn't they want him to talk to Jesus? But they would have viewed him as a distraction. So there's some things that we learn in this. So one thing is Bartimaeus is persistent. He knows what his problem is. He's blind. We don't know how long he's been blind, but he's blind. So he has something that he is specifically looking for from Jesus. He has a need. He wants to have sight again. And so he's very specific about what he wants from Jesus. And he was desperate for that to happen. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Now, what was interesting is when they say, "Okay, Bartimaeus, you can come." I mean, he comes at once. I mean, he didn't mess around. It's not like what I do sometimes to my wife when she says, "Hey, I need you." And I go, "Okay, just a minute. I'll be there in a second. I'll be there in a few." We do that all the time. When somebody calls us, we want to keep doing what we're doing or finish what we're doing, or we don't think it's as important as they do. And so we're not in a big rush to get there. But he doesn't mess around. He jumps up, he goes. It's immediate. It's eagerly. And so when he talks about at the end, this idea of faith, that's probably where Jesus sees it. That he didn't go, "Well, yeah, I know I was calling you, but I didn't really want to talk to you. I just thought maybe that was what I was supposed to do." But he comes right away. And so he knows that Jesus can cure his blindness. He has that faith that it's going to happen that way. So one of the things that Bartimaeus had to do, which in some ways I think his was easier, but we have the same issue, is before we go to Jesus, sometimes we don't do any kind of a self-examination. we don't look inside us to see what we need to correct or fix. Now, in Bartimaeus, he knew he was blind, and that's what he was trying to get accomplished. So his seems pretty straightforward. In us, sometimes we have things that we say, oh, well, we want to be better at, or we want to become closer to God because we know it'll lead us to a better spot. But we don't really do the work of figuring out what that is. We don't do a self-examination. So we just kind of want to go in general. So what I would say is we don't really know what we want exactly, so we'll just throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. I think a lot of us do that. We don't really think about what it is we need to change in our life, what it is we want God to help us do. Now, sometimes at church here, when you have people that have addictions, whatever that is, they'll specifically ask for help overcoming those addictions. In a lot of ways, I think that's what Bartimaeus was doing. His was blindness. But I think in general, we don't often have a particular thing that we're trying to do. Now, maybe the most important lesson is I don't really think Bartimaeus understood who Jesus was. And the reason that I think we can come to that conclusion is when he yells out, Son of David, and he does it numerous times in this reading, that Son of David would be part of King David's lineage that would lead to national power. And so again, he's thinking of Jesus as a Messiah that's going to be a king, a powerful person, that Israel's become a world power again, that they're going to get rid of the Romans and anybody else that's bothering them. And so he's really thinking of it in terms of a political person. Where I think it's important for us is sometimes I think people think they have to have perfect knowledge or perfect faith or whatever words you want to insert there. We want to have a complete, total understanding. And so sometimes when I was working at the bank, we would call it the analysis by paralysis, that we would have to overstudy whatever the topic was to death. And so we could never come with a conclusion because we could never collect all the information. It was like we wanted to know every single bit of information. So instead of making a decision, all we would do is collect information. I think that's what people do sometimes with their faith. Instead of really just having faith that, yeah, we don't know everything. And we may not be right on everything, but you know what? God will get us through it. We want to make sure, I think sometimes, that we have 100% understanding of what faith is, quote marks, air quotes. We want to have 100% confirmation of what faith is before we're willing to say, oh yeah, we can follow Jesus. And so when I first became a pastor, David was the conference superintendent, and he asked me if I had any questions or concerns to the first church I was appointed at. And I said, well, yes, I do. And he said, well, what's your problems? I go, I don't know if I know what I'm doing. I think this is a good example. We don't have to know everything. God will walk us through it. And so what David said to me, David Byram, what he said to me was, you know what, if you love people and you let them love you, they will have grace and you guys will together get through whatever the issue is. I think that's where we're at with Bartimaeus here. He knew what he wanted. He knew he had faith that Jesus could help him, but he clearly didn't understand everything, or he wouldn't have been calling him Son of David. And so I think it's okay for us to not always have all the answers and be the same way. So what's interesting here is Jesus heals him. He can see, and we've got some of these stories, these lessons, where the person that's healed just takes off and never sees him again. That's not the case with Bartimaeus here. Once he gets what he's seeking, which is his sight, then he becomes a follower of Jesus. He doesn't run away. He sees what a great gift he's been given, and then he stays close to Jesus. Now, we're not very far away from where kind of everybody scatters once Jesus is arrested, but he's going to stay with him. For us, we have that same issue sometimes. We go to Jesus in prayer when something's going on. Usually it's bad. We don't go there when things are great. And then when that catastrophe, when that event comes to an end, whatever the end is, then we move away from Jesus instead of continuing to follow. And so you need to think about that. Do I only go to Jesus in prayer when something's wrong? And then do I forget to continue to pray, or do I stay a close follower? And so if you look at Bartimaeus, and really Bartimaeus isn't any different than us, I think there's three things. Bartimaeus did his self-examination. Now, his, I think, was a little more straightforward, but he knew what he needed, and he asked Jesus for that. You might say prayer, but he asked him in person. The other thing that Bartimaeus showed was how grateful he was for what the Lord did for him. And I would suggest to us that sometimes we don't show that gratitude, or we only show it for very short term, and then we forget about it or we don't pay attention. And so I think gratitude is the second part of this, and we need to be more careful about how grateful that we are. I think we sometimes think that when we don't get what we want, it's because we weren't worthy or God didn't think it was important. But maybe God's answer was, no, that's not the most important thing that you need right now. And even if I gave that to you, it's going to get in the way of other things. So think about gratitude. And the last thing we learn here from Bartimaeus is loyal. He goes to him with a heart full of faith. Jesus is able to cure him, but he doesn't run away. He stays loyal to the Lord. And all of us need to do that too, because when things go wrong, and things will go wrong on our lives, that happens to all of us, it sometimes makes it hard for us to stay close to the Lord. I think that loyalty gets tested more when things are bad than when things are good, but that loyalty should be there all the time. So here at Avondale, we meet every Sunday at 11 a.m. You're certainly welcome to attend. We have Holy Communion on the first Sunday of the month generally. And if you would like to participate with Holy Communion, but you're not able to come to church, you may give me a call at 765-749-4354, and we'll work out a way to do that, whether you're in your home or you're in a nursing home, whatever, we can make that happen. Every Thursday at 5 o'clock, there is a community meal served here at the church, and it's from about 5 to 6. The second Thursday of the month, Second Harvest brings what they call their mobile market, and anyone in the area that wants to participate in that can. They get some general information, name, address, that kind of stuff for some grants that Second Harvest applies for, but there's no cost. If you want to volunteer for that, you can give me a call. I just gave you my number, and the volunteers are here roughly from 3:30 until 6. The Second Harvest serves that food from roughly 4 o'clock to 6. So we set up like 30 minutes before, and it takes us 10 or 15 minutes to get torn down when it's over. Every Tuesday, there's a meeting here at the church from 5:30 to 6:30. It's for both men and women. The only time that's not going to happen in the near future is on Election Day, which I think is November the 5th. That Tuesday, the church is going to be a polling place, so they're not going to be able to meet here in person that week. Again, if there's anything that you'd like to know about Avondale, please give me a call. We'd love to have you here every Sunday. So a pretty good congregational mix of people from younger to older, and we'd love to have you here. Thanks again.